When giants ruled America and Oklahoma. Could giants be a part of Oklahoma's past? Near a small town in eastern Oklahoma were a group of mounds long known to be Indian burial grounds. As for a town, it's spelled Spiro. One commentator said it's pronounced Spiro. This source says it's pronounced Spiro. I don't live there, so I'm not exactly sure. If you know, please post it in the comments section. Anyway, a newspaper article written back in the 1930s mentioned a giant femur bone found at the burial site. It was likely sold to a private collector, along with all the other artifacts dug up and looted by the Pocolo Mining Company back in the 1930s. But the mention in that article does give one pause. Could giants really have walked the North American continent? One researcher did a lot of digging and found some compelling evidence. Richard J. Dewhurst has degrees in journalism, film, and television. He has written and edited for various television programs, including the History Channel, Fox News, and ABC News. He's also really tall. Why is that important? Because since he was a youth, he's been fascinated with giants. Being the tallest one in his school, he probably identified with them. But he wanted to know, were giants really real? He found nothing through traditional research, so he combed through newspaper clippings. What he found astounded him. It turns out that a lot of giant skeletons have been discovered in many parts of North America, including Oklahoma. And every time a giant skeleton was discovered, someone would write about it in a local newspaper. Giant skeletons have been found, specifically around Native American burial grounds in Ohio, Georgia, and Oklahoma. They've been found in other states as well. A giant skeleton of, quote, enormous size, end quote, was found at an Indian burial ground in New York State. A pipe, rude metals, and other articles were also found with the skeleton. In 1804, giant human bones were found so well preserved they could be measured. These people were typically 7 to 9 feet tall. Giant skeletons were found well preserved and with red hair at Lovelock Cave in Nevada. According to newspaper accounts at the time, giant skeletons were also found in Maryland near Antietam. Skeletons of giants were also found near the Potomac River and also in Pennsylvania and Ohio. Whenever these skeletons were found, the jawbones were large enough that a man could easily slip it over his face. So why isn't this common knowledge? Why was it so hard for Richard Dewhurst and others to find out about giant skeletons in the United States and in other parts as well? Even today, do a Google search and AI will tell you it's folklore. Turns out it has a lot to do with the theory of evolution, manifest destiny, and a hatred of Mormons. It also has a lot to do with the Smithsonian Institution. In 1879, Congress created the Bureau of Ethnology to study the Native Americans. This bureau was placed under the guidance and patronage of the Smithsonian Institute. Major John Wesley Powell was placed in charge of it. Powell was a geologist and an explorer. He surveyed the American West and led expeditions. He was also the son of a preacher who lost his flock to Mormon missionaries. The Smithsonian's claim was to, quote, increase the diffusion of knowledge among men. But starting in the 1880s, people there actively worked to cover up the truth. Powell was the architect of that cover-up. Powell argued that Native Americans, he called them savages, by the way, he argued they weren't related to the so-called races of antiquity in other portions of the world, end quote. In other words, Powell argued that the Native Americans weren't in any way related to the so-called lost tribes. Why is this important? Because of Joseph Smith, founder of the Church of Latter-day Saints. He argued that some of the lost tribes of Israel migrated to the United States and became ancestors of the Mormons. Powell wasn't about to publicly agree with any argument that would support the Mormons. Powell was also a champion of evolution. In his book, The Ancient Giants Who Ruled America, Richard J. Dewhurst wrote, we are shown charts of man becoming bipedal, and each new man being bigger and smarter than the last. This is in direct contradiction to the charts we use for every other animal we study. We have only to look at a bird and be told that it was once a dinosaur to know how false this paradigm of man's growth is. He went on to say, Look at the evolution of most animals, and the record says they got smaller over time, not bigger. However, with all the modern edifices of education built on the theory of evolution and the growing stature of humanity, we can't very well have the Smithsonian running around telling people that we have degenerated from an ancient race of giants who once ruled America, now can we? Then there was the theory of manifest destiny that came about at that time. It argued that America was inhabited by inferior races, namely the Native Americans. The manifest destiny also argued that, quote, civilized man, end quote, had a God-given right to exterminate those inferior races. Pushed by the Democratic Party, the manifest destiny gave people the right to exploit this country. Powell wasn't about to admit that an advanced civilization lived in the American continent more than 5,000 years ago. Another reason giants may have been eradicated from modern history is because they are mentioned in the Bible. The book of Genesis tells us that the sons of God, also known as demons, married women, whomever they chose, and bred with them. The offspring of those demons and human women were giants, men of renown. So it would make sense that these giants were rulers, just as the archaeological sites have suggested. According to archaeologists, only rulers were buried under the mounds. Since giant skeletons have been found there, it would make sense that they were rulers. Plus, many of these giants were buried with robes decorated in pearls and wearing copper crowns. There were so many of these giants that some biblical scholars have suggested that God sent a great flood to wipe out this giant race. God's purpose was to wipe out the Nephilim before all traces of humanity had disappeared. Yet, even after the great flood, the Bible talks about giants. In the Bible, in the book of Numbers, Moses sent out a number of men to spy out the new land of Canaan. They reported giants in the land. They said they felt as if there were grasshoppers beside them. In the book of Samuel, David fought a giant named Goliath. Biblical scholar Ryan Pitterson argues that while Noah and his sons did not have Nephilim DNA, one of his daughter-in-laws likely did. That would explain why Nephilims, or giants, were still on the earth up to David's day. The Bible also talks about how these Nephilim developed all kinds of skills. Thousands of years ago, people made artwork out of copper that could only be found in Crete. These copper articles were found in North America as well, meaning there had to be worldwide trade. The ancient people living here made beautiful artwork and fine weavings. It's highly likely they traveled on ships long before the Portuguese and the Spaniards did. Naturally, this goes against evolution's theory that man is evolving out of something half human and half ape. That would explain why Powell suppressed anything out there about giants. When Charles Doolittle Walcott became secretary, their term for CEO, of the Smithsonian in 1907, he made the Powell Doctrine the museum's official dogma. It's still the official policy today. So is it any surprise that a giant femur bone was found near Spiro Mounds? Or is it Spiro? Let me know how you think that word should be pronounced in the comment section below. Thank you, my amazing friend, for watching Okie Lore. Click the like button, subscribe if you haven't already, and I'll see you in the next episode.